Hello, this is Lisa from For You in Oberlin, Ohio, and I am making this video to talk through the necessary steps for homework for the members of my Knit a Top-Down Sweater class. But I wanted to make a video that I could post to my website and also to a YouTube channel so everybody could see it, because these are important things that are really, really good to do when you are starting a sweater project. For some of the people in my class, this is going to actually be their first sweater, and I'm very excited for them. So I want to help them start off on the right foot. So here are a few of the steps that I've written down. The first thing is that we need to make our swatch. I know I am a person who never ever liked to swatch. When I was first knitting, I just thought it was a waste of time, it was a waste of yarn, all the things, you know. But I have to say that I am a reformed swatcher. I have seen the light, I have been converted. And so for those of you who were like me before, when I hated swatching, I'm going to give you an analogy. Date your yarn. Your needles and your yarn need to date each other. Think about being in a relationship, because that's what a project is. It's a relationship. It's a relationship between you and your yarn. It's a relationship between you and your needles. And it's a relationship between your needles and your yarn. So what I'm going to suggest is that your needles and your yarn are dating each other. Okay? So here are the specs for the sweater. It's DK weight yarn. Now, I know that I am going to be using Madeline Tosh DK for this, and a few other folks have bought that yarn. If you're not using that yarn and you want to use another DK weight yarn, I like several DK weight yarns. I have Vivacious DK by Fiber Spates in the shop. I have Souvenir DK by Destination Yarn in the shop. I have Blue-Faced Leicester DK by Forest Lane Fiber Company in the shop. I have a lot of beautiful, beautiful yarns in the shop that could be used, and you may very well have some gorgeous DK weight yarns in your stash. So be sure that you use a yarn you like, and swatching is going to help you know whether or not you actually do like your yarn. So be careful and don't skimp or skip that step. Be sure you like your yarn. That's really important, because if you're knitting a sweater, you are going to be in a long-term relationship with this yarn. And if you don't like each other, it's going to be a bad relationship. The next thing we want you to do is look at the suggested needle size of your pattern. We will be doing the basic raglan pullover by Joji Locatelli, and her suggestions for needle sizes are a size 4 for the ribbing of the sweater, the cuff, the sleeves, and the hem, and a size 6 for the main body of the sweater. If you like to knit quickly, or if you just like the slip of metal needles, use those. I use metal needles a lot, not exclusively, but most of the time. I especially use it for complicated patterns. The great thing about the basic raglan pullover is it is not a complicated pattern. It's a really, really easy, wonderful pattern, and it's perfect for a first sweater. She suggests that you use a circular needle that's at least 24 inches long. Gauge for this project, and you'll notice in most patterns that gauge is given across a 4-inch or 10-centimeter distance, okay? That accounts for the variations in your stitches. We don't all make perfectly equal stitches all the time. Some of us never make perfectly equal stitches. So instead of worrying about variations within 1 inch or 2 inches even, you have a bigger distance. You have 4 inches, or if you read in centimeters, a 10-centimeter range, and we're going to measure across that. So what this tells me is that when I measure across those 4 inches, I should have, for gauge, 21 stitches across. This pattern also gives a row gauge, which is really important, not so much for how you're making the sweater. If you want a looser, drapier sweater, if your row gauge is off, it's really not terrible. It's not the end of the world, but it really is the end of the world if you're worried about running out of yarn, because your row gauge is really important to tell you, do I have enough yarn to finish this pattern? If your row gauge is off by 4, 5, 10 rounds, you're either going to end up with a whole lot more yarn or not enough yarn, and not everybody likes to play yarn chicken. Okay, so the thing I'm going to ask everybody to do is I'm going to ask you to make a swatch. I want you to find size 6 circular needles and your yarn, and what you're going to do is make a swatch in the round. And I am going to talk about making a swatch in the round for a moment. It's not nearly as hard as I thought it was when I first heard about it. You're going to take circular needles and you're going to cast on, I would say about 30 stitches, but you want it to end up being at least 4 inches wide, maybe a little more, maybe closer to 5 or 6. And I would make my swatch about 4 inches tall. That's about right. So what you're going to do is you're going to cast on those stitches, and you're going to bring your yarn around the back and start again from your starting position on the right. And then you're going to knit to the end of the row, and then you're going to bring it around again. It feels like it's using up a lot of yarn. It's not really, but you're going around the back so that you're not purling, because it says in stockinette stitch, that is how the stitches are going to be measured, in that stockinette pattern that we're doing, because most of this sweater is stockinette. It is knitting repeatedly over and over in the round. And for stockinette in the round, you never purl. For stockinette knit flat, you knit a row and then you purl a row. You knit a row and then you purl a row. That's not what happens in stockinette in the round. So you don't want to purl back, because a lot of people's knit stitches and purl stitches are not the same tension. Some of us knit tighter than we purl. Some of us, our purls are really difficult and they're really uneven or bumpy. And you want to knit your swatch in the way you're going to knit your pattern. And if all you're doing is knitting, you want a swatch that shows you only knitting. There's a great video on YouTube that I just watched that I think everyone should look for. It's 11 gauge swatch secrets plus how to swatch in the round, and it's done by the Grocery Girls. The only reason I'm recommending this video is that I can't say it better than them. I want you to see what they do. And Jody and Tracy are just two of the most wonderful people, and I love them, and I really want you to see their energy and their you can do this vibe, which I'm down with that. They're awesome and I love them. That's pretty much what I need you to do for homework on Saturday. If you are knitting a sweater and you're not necessarily doing the class with us, use this advice for your next sweater project or your next project in the round. I think you're going to be pretty happy with it. After you have knit your swatch, you've bound it off, what you need to do is you need to soak it, block it. Oh, I'm sorry, before you block it, you're going to cut up the back where the floats are. You're just going to cut the floats so that your swatch will lay nice and flat. Then you're going to soak it and block it. And then you're going to measure your gauge. The great thing about swatching is it tells you, do I like this yarn? That's an important thing. Sometimes it looks great in the skein and it doesn't look like what you want once you've knit it. Do my needles and yarn match? Am I getting gauge? Is it the kind of fabric I want to create? Is it the appropriate fabric for the project I'm doing? Am I way too tight or way too loose and off of my gauge? If I have too many stitches, I need to go up a needle size or 2. If I have too few stitches, I need to go down a needle size or 2. So those are important things. This is why you want to be sure not only that you swatch in the round, but that you cut your floats, soak it, block it, and measure it.